The universe you are sitting in right now does not exist independently of observation. This is not philosophy. This is not mysticism. It is the conclusion of one of the most rigorous physicists of the 20th century, a man who coined the term black hole, who helped build the hydrogen bomb, who taught Richard Feynman. John Wheeler spent 30 years investigating what observation means in quantum mechanics. He arrived at a position the Chandogya Upanishad stated in 4 Sanskrit words 25 centuries earlier. Tat tvam asi. You are that. The observer and the universe it observes are not two separate things. If Wheeler is right, and the experimental evidence points toward him, then the boundary between you and everything you perceive is not where it appears to be. This video maps what Wheeler found in the delayed choice experiment against what the Chandogya Upanishad described from the other direction entirely. Before the physics, before the Upanishad, test something directly. Right now, notice the room you are in. The walls, the air, the sounds, the sensation of the chair or surface beneath you. Now ask something carefully. Where exactly do you end and the room begin? Not philosophically, physically. Locate the precise boundary. The skin, the air immediately around the body, the edge of the visual field. Notice, the boundary is not as clear as it first appeared. The Chandogya Upanishad says this is not an illusion. It is the deepest fact about the nature of reality. Wheeler says physics arrives at the same boundary through a completely different route. Neither is asking you to believe anything. Both are asking you to look more carefully at what is already here. John Archibald Wheeler worked at Princeton University for nearly 40 years. His credentials in mainstream physics are unimpeachable. He co-authored the first comprehensive textbook on general relativity with Misner and Thorne. He coined the term black hole among his doctoral students, Richard Feynman and Kip Thorne. Wheeler was not a mystic. He was a rigorous mathematical physicist who became obsessed with one question that physics could not answer from inside itself. What is the role of the observer in bringing physical reality into being? In 1978, he proposed a thought experiment that became known as the delayed choice experiment. The setup is simple. A single photon is fired at a device with 2 possible paths. If a detector is placed to measure which path the photon takes, it behaves as a particle. It takes one path. If no detector is placed, it behaves as a wave. It takes both paths simultaneously and creates an interference pattern. This much was already known from the double-slit experiment. Wheeler added one radical element. The choice of whether to measure or not is made after the photon has already passed the point where it would have had to decide which path to take. The decision of the observer reaches back into the apparent past and determines what the photon was doing before the decision was made. In 2007, Vincent Jacques and his team at the University of Paris published an experimental confirmation in the journal Science. The results were unambiguous. The photon's apparent past behavior is determined by the future choice of the observer. Wheeler drew the philosophical conclusion directly. We are participants in bringing into being not only the near and here, but the far away and long ago. Here is the precise limit of Wheeler's claim, and it matters. Wheeler's participatory universe is a philosophical interpretation of quantum mechanics, not the consensus position of all physicists. Many worlds' interpretation assigns no special role to observers. Pilot wave theory treats observation as ordinary physical interaction. Decoherence theory explains the appearance of classical reality without invoking consciousness. The delayed choice experiment is confirmed physics. What it means is still debated. Wheeler's conclusion, that observers participate in bringing reality into being, is where he arrived after decades of investigation. The Upanishads arrived at a structurally resonant position from a completely different direction. Two independent investigations. The convergence is the beginning of the inquiry, not the end of it. In 1989, at the Santa Fe Institute, Wheeler presented the culmination of this thinking in a paper titled Information, Physics, Quantum: The Search for Links. His central claim distilled to three words: it from bit. Every particle, every field of force, even the space-time continuum itself, derives its existence and meaning from the answers to yes or no questions posed by physical apparatuses. Reality is not made of matter. Matter is made of information. The universe, at its most fundamental level, is the accumulation of measurements. And this leads to Wheeler's most radical statement. The universe is a self-excited circuit. Observers are not passive recorders of a pre-existing external reality. They are participants in creating the reality they observe. The universe requires observers in order to exist as the universe. Before we map this against the Upanishads, test this directly for 20 seconds. You are observing right now. The room is present. Sounds are present. This voice is present. Notice, can you find the observing happening independently of the observed? Or do they arise together, the observer and the observed as a single event? This is not philosophy. This is what Wheeler is asking physics to investigate, and it is what the Chandogya Upanishad investigated from the inside. The Chandogya Upanishad is among the oldest of the principal Upanishads, composed approximately 700 BCE as part of the Samaveda tradition. It contains the most repeated of all the Mahavakyas, the great sayings that summarize the philosophical position of the entire tradition. Uddalaka Aruni, a philosopher and teacher, is instructing his son Shvetaketu. He asks Shvetaketu to dissolve salt in water and bring it back the next morning. Shvetaketu returns with the cup. The salt is invisible, dissolved completely. Uddalaka asks, "Can you find the salt?" Shvetaketu cannot. Uddalaka says, "Taste the water at the top, at the middle, at the bottom." It is salt throughout, present everywhere, visible nowhere, inseparable from the water it pervades. Then Uddalaka says, Tat tvam asi, Shvetaketu. You are that. The Atman, the awareness through which Shvetaketu perceives the cup, the water, the salt, is not separate from Brahman, the fundamental ground of all reality. As the salt is inseparable from the water, the observer is inseparable from what is observed. The boundary Shvetaketu is looking for does not exist at the level the question assumes. Tat tvm asi, that is you. The reality you are looking at and the awareness doing the looking arise from the same ground. This distinction matters, and both the India audience and the rigorous physicist will notice if it is missing. Wheeler's participatory universe does not necessarily require a conscious observer. Any physical measurement, any detection apparatus, collapses the wave function. The observer in Wheeler's framework may not require consciousness. The Chandogya Upanishad makes a stronger claim. Tattvam asi is not simply that the observer and the observed are connected. It is that the awareness through which everything is known, Atman, is identical with the fundamental ground, Brahman. Wheeler identifies the structural relationship. Observer and reality are a single participatory system. The Chandogya Upanishad identifies the nature of the observer itself. The awareness doing the observing is the ground of what is being observed. Wheeler maps the architecture. The Upanishad maps the nature of the architect. The Buddhist tradition adds a third direction. Nagarjuna, writing approximately 150 CE, described pratityasamutpada, dependent origination. No phenomenon arises independently. Every phenomenon arises through conditions. The observer is one of the conditions through which the observed arises as a phenomenon. The observed is one of the conditions through which the observer arises as an observer. Neither exists prior to the other. Neither exists without the other. Wheeler, it from bit. No physical reality exists prior to the measurement that brings it into apparent existence. Nagarjuna, no phenomenon exists prior to the conditions through which it arises. 3 investigations, 3 independent discoveries, the same structural conclusion. The separation between observer and observed is not ultimate. Now let us test this directly. The investigation the Chandogya Upanishad prescribes begins not with the external world, but with the one doing the observing. Close your eyes if possible. Notice that you are aware. Notice that this awareness is directed outward, towards sounds, sensations, the memory of this voice. Now turn the inquiry toward the awareness itself. Not what you are aware of, the awareness doing the observing. Ask without trying to solve it. Is this awareness a thing among other things? Or is it the condition through which all things appear? Does the observer have an inside and an outside? Or does it contain the inside and outside as appearances within it? Wheeler says, the universe requires observers in order to exist as the universe. The Chandogya Upanishad says, the observer requires the universe in order to exist as an observer, and both arise from a single ground. Tattvamasi, you are that. Rest there. Let the breath return naturally. In 1978, John Wheeler proposed a thought experiment. In 2007, it was confirmed in the journal Science. The future choice of the observer determines the apparent past behavior of the photon. In 1989, Wheeler distilled his conclusion. It from bit. Reality arises from the posing of questions. The universe is a participatory system. More than 25 centuries earlier, in the Chandogya Upanishad, Uddalaka Aruni dissolved salt in water and said to his son, Tattvam asi, that which the universe is made of, and the awareness through which it is known, are not two separate things. Wheeler mapped this from outside, through particle physics and thought experiments. The Chandogya Upanishad mapped it from inside, through direct inquiry into the nature of the observer. Whether one accepts their conclusions or not, the question they both arrived at cannot be avoided once it is clearly seen. Is the observer standing outside the universe, looking at it from a distance? Or is the universe the observer looking at itself? Ancient wisdom, quantum mystery, direct knowing. This is quantum gnosis.